welcome to the garden. Today we're going to be doing a batch of dried jalapenos. I've got some already dry right over here, but I've had to slice them into rings first. Jalapenos have a lot of moisture. They're kind of like a bell pepper. Some peppers you can actually dry whole, like these little chilies. These are really spicy. They're actually really similar to these pepper flakes. These are just little chunks of broken down peppers, including the seeds. So these are good and spicy. You can also break them down further, and that'll be similar to paprika, which is actually nice and mild, or this cayenne pepper, which is really nice and spicy. So we'll start by just slicing these into really thin rings. We're going to be using a technique called the claw. So you can hold your hand in a sort of C shape like this, and we can use this to hold our fruit and to guide our knife at the same time. This is actually easier with a larger knife, and you'll see why in a second. So we'll be using this protruding knuckle to guide our blade. Just moving it like this in small motions. You always want to keep your fingers tucked in, and we're just inching our way backwards. Just making these very thin slices each time. And it may be easier to move your blade just a little bit each time, and then scoot your fingers back, always using that knuckle as a guide. You can see there's a little gap in between our fingers and the blade, and you get beautifully thin slices of jalapeno. That'll probably dry in at least a day or even less in the oven or a dehydrator. But look at how consistent these are. These are beautiful. Now once you get about halfway up the pepper, you're going to start seeing those seeds. And when you're slicing rings like this, it's really hard to avoid them. If you do want to avoid those seeds, there's a technique where you can slice right up here and just cut right along those seeds. They're all in the middle there. You get that beautiful fruit, but we're actually after these really small rings. So they're probably going to be pretty spicy. For some people, jalapenos are not very spicy, but for those of us not accustomed to it, they actually can be very hot. Now I'm going to show you a more advanced technique. We're using the same principles as our claw, just on a much smaller scale, using just one fingertip as a guide, just like we did our claw technique. This is just a much smaller scale. Making little slices, scooting back just a little bit, using that blade right up to the fingertip, and slicing down. So it's a much smaller scale, but you end up protecting your finger by making these little tiny slices where you never actually bring the blade above that point of contact. Now from here, I'm just going to put these on a wire rack. So now we're just going to space these out. They're big enough not to fall through those cracks, and you do want to be mindful of what you touch. These seeds are really spicy. They can actually make your fingers burn, and anything you touch can also burn, including your eyes and other sensitive parts of the body. And because these are sliced so thin, we actually don't even need to put these in the oven. My last batch I just left out and they were dry overnight. So I'm going to prepare the rest of our jalapenos just like this. We'll just space them out on this wire rack and let them sit overnight. Now you could put these in the oven at a really low temperature, like maybe 150, and just keep an eye on them. They'll actually shrivel up and wrinkle up, so they might cling onto your rack at first, but you can just brush them off. Don't actually need to put these in the sun or even in the oven if you don't want. You can just set them out and they should dry naturally. Unless it's really humid, then you probably want to pop them in the oven. Now a food dehydrator would be perfect for this. Just be aware that spice is going to be in the air. I can already see these ones starting to dry a little bit. Whereas these ones are really fresh and shiny, These are more dull and starting to kind of shrivel. Yeah, I think I can squeeze a couple more in here. And already I've got a little tiny cut on my finger here and it's burning. So it might be a good idea to wear gloves if you're extremely sensitive to heat. Normally I just slice my jalapenos into chunks and then freeze them. I think they preserve a lot of their flavor that way. These are probably going to lose a lot of that flavor, although maintaining most of that heat. And here they are after about 18 hours. So it hasn't even been a full day yet. They look really nice. Some of them do fall through the cracks as they shrivel and dry. And you can see they're not brittle. I can actually kind of bend them. So they're still a little bit chewy. You might want to finish them off in the oven if you're going to powder them down. But I'm just going to use mine just like this. Once they're dry, they become quite shriveled. They kind of remind me of loose leaf tea, like a oolong tea. And I haven't actually tasted these yet, so let's try one out. Yeah, I'm getting that heat right away. It's nice and spicy. They actually remind me of something that's jalapeno flavored, like jalapeno chips or something. The texture is similar to our sun-dried tomatoes, a little bit chewy. So to powder them down, I'd probably want to finish them off in the oven until they're bone dry. But I think I'm just going to store them like this. I might leave them out to dry a little bit longer and then seal them in a plastic bag. But then we can use them in chili or in Mexican cuisine. So I hope you give this a go in your garden. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.